Hey everyone, and happy Friday. I have got another episode of Authors and Agents with Rose Quinn for you. Today I have the lovely Crystal Maldonado on the podcast with me today. She is the author of Fat Chance Charlie Vega, which is the ooey gooeyest best book you're gonna read this month. It is super good, and she's gonna tell us all about it, let us in on her publishing journey, and share some other things about herself with us. But before we get to the interview, I want to tell you about my favorite book right now. I'm currently reading Wings of Fury by Emily R. King, and if you know me, you followed me on social media for a while, you know I will read anything that Emily writes. It's always so good. She's had 2 previous series, and they're both so good. You need to go out and get both of them. But this one, I got a first reads edition from Amazon. If you have, I think you have to be signed up for Kindle Unlimited, and you get the option of 1 free book every month. And Wings of Fury was one of them, which is so exciting. So I'm about 70% of the way done, and I know it's already, a winner, of course. She's so good at what she does. It's just, she puts so much effort into the world building. She does such a wonderful job. With this one, it's a lot of, about different gods, and the way that she does them and portrays them is just so great. I love the mystery that she weaves throughout her series. You can't put it down. You're so, intrigued. You need to know what's going on. So let me go ahead and read you the blurb. Cronus, god of gods, whose inheritance is the world, among his possessions women, imprisoned and fated to serve. The strong-minded Althea Lambros controls her own fate and lives to honor her dying mother's plea to protect her 2 sisters at all costs. Althea's journey towards crushing the tyranny has begun. It is a destiny foretold by the fates, and she is following their visions. On the southern isle of Crete, I think that's how you say it, hidden among mortal women who have fled the Titans, is the boy god, son of Cronus and believed dead. He shares Althea's destiny to vanquish the Almighty, fate willing. Because Cronus has caught wind of the plot, he's amassing his own forces against Althea's righteous rebellion and all those who will no longer surrender or run. There will be war. If she's to survive to write their history, the indomitable Althea must soar higher than any god. And there's definitely a theme in this book of the power of women, but also, the always present oppression of women. And Emily just does such a great job. It is a wonderful novel. So it comes out for everybody on March 1st, and you guys are going to love it. You have to make sure you go ahead and pre-order it. It's so, 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 so good. So that's my favorite book, Wings of Fury by Emily R. King. And now let's go ahead and get to know Crystal. Crystal, can you start off by telling me about your novel, Fat Chance Charlie Vega?
Absolutely. So Fat Chance Charlie Vega is my young adult debut novel. It's about a 16-year-old fat Puerto Rican girl. So she loves books and she loves writing and she loves love. So she's really searching for love. This is her goal right now. And she's doing all of that while she's navigating feelings about her body and her mom and her, very perfect best friend as she sees it. And just trying to, live her life in this town that feels sometimes a little suffocating. And while managing all of that, she really just wants to meet someone cute who likes her.
Right. We all want that.
Exactly.
Well, that's amazing. I'm so excited for you and so excited for this story to come out and have people be able to read it and, connect with it. Tell me a little bit about your journey to this point, to having this book come out into the world.
Sure. So I feel like I have kind of a weird journey. Everyone's is unique, right?
Right.
So I started reading this book maybe in 2015, 2016, just as a thing to do. I had always loved writing. And so this was a thing I did on my lunch break from my,
Yes.
full-time job or on the weekends. And I didn't finish drafting it until 2017, 2018, just because I was taking my time, And around that time, I was not in the best headspace, mentally. So writing had become this, really wonderful escape for me. And it was, a fun thing to look forward to. So then I'm just like sitting with a finished manuscript like, in my Google Drive. And I'm like, okay, well now what, right? So I didn't know anything about publishing, and I was very interested in it. Like, publishing a book was a dream of mine, but I think I was also very like scared of it and nervous to try and pursue it because like, what if it didn't work out? I was nervous, you know?
Of course.
So I had seen some encouragement on Twitter from, I mean, you know, I was just scrolling through your feed, and I know there was some discussion from a couple of like, you know, by POC authors that I follow and just writers in general who were saying things like, you know, now's the time to stop letting imposter syndrome hold you back. Like, let's like just go for it, you know? And at that time, I felt like I really needed to hear that, and that was so meaningful. And so I was like, you know, I think I might try to get this book out in the world. And I thought if I could just get somebody to read it, like it might make a difference to like one brown girl somewhere, you know? And that would be tough. And so I started looking for agents at the end of summer 2018, and then heard back from one, you know, a couple months later. It's great.
So great. I mean, you know, I think we all struggle with that imposter syndrome at many different times during our writer journey, right? But, you know, I love that this book started for you too as like a very therapeutic thing. I mean, writing for me has always been that way. I like, if I'm not writing, there's like something wrong, you know, and I feel just so much better when I do. So I'm so glad you use that as a technique, and then look at where you are now.
I know. I can't believe it's like becoming a real thing now.
That's amazing.
So surreal.
Yeah, so surreal. Well, I'm so excited for you and excited to, you know, see what happens and the reactions that readers will give you as it comes out. That's probably like the best part, right? But tell me a little bit about querying, how you approached it, and then maybe like your top tips for writers who are in the querying trenches right now.
Yeah. So like I said, I really didn't know much about publishing. Like, so I wasn't in any writing circles. I wasn't part of the writing community on Twitter. I didn't know about things like the manuscript wish list or, you know, like any of those things. And I wish I had, but I basically went to trusty Google and started researching things that way.
Yeah.
And Reddit as well, like searching through like the publishing, different subreddits, and just kind of reading things and figuring out what I could do and what would work for me. So I specifically started my search by looking for an agent who was really committed to telling like own voices stories from marginalized authors. Because really when I wrote this book and I wrote Charlie's story, her identity is really everything in this book. Like it's what shapes her. It's what she's sort of figuring out, you know, that she's fat and that she's Puerto Rican and that she feels kind of alienated. Like all of those things sort of come together, and that was really meaningful in the book. So I wanted to find an agent who felt similarly and who wouldn't give me feedback like, have you considered making your main character thin or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
So my process was really identifying those agents first, and then, you know, writing the query letter specific to those agents. And in my head, I was thinking, okay, I'll write them maybe 5 or so at a time, send them out, wait a couple weeks and see what happens. And then when I inevitably get like rejected or hear nothing, take the next 5 and then see how it goes. But I got really lucky, and one of the first agents that I queried ended up getting back to me, and we had a phone call and we clicked just so instantly that there was like no question for me. Like I didn't need to hear from anybody else. I was like, I'm sold. Yes, where can I sign the contract? Let's work together. So it was great. And then, so really, I think if you're querying now, it feels like the landscape is a little different, right? Like we're in a pandemic and it's really tough. And so if I was doing this again, or to anybody kind of new to the process, I feel like I would suggest researching something that I didn't do much of, right? Like I just use Google, but like really using Twitter and the writing community and some of these phenomenal resources like the manuscript wish list, just to sort of figure out what are you looking for in an agent. Like maybe you write out a list of questions or a list of things that you want your agent to do for you, or you know what I mean? Like basically plan out your first conversation with that agent before you even know who you're gonna query.
I think that is great advice for sure.
Yeah. I mean, one thing for me when I got on these phone calls and like I heard from my agent, I just like was so unprepared. I didn't even know what to ask. So having those questions ready, or even just some notes, I think would have been helpful for me, and I think will be helpful for anyone who is querying. And then, you know, maybe participate in some of those Twitter events where you can query and sort of see if people are interested in the book you're thinking about or the book you're working on. So like PitNad or DVPit or whatever else like works for you, and then you can kind of get a feel for if there's like room in the market right now for your book, and you can talk to some agents that way, and I think that's a great way to get involved. And then the last thing I'd say is like just go for it. Like don't be afraid. Don't let imposter syndrome hold you back, you know? Just do it.
I love it. I mean, I think your advice about and your own story about looking for agents who were, excited about the type of story that you had written is so important. I mean, I feel like querying, most of us just want to like get through it, just like by the skin of our teeth, just like, okay, let's just get it over with. But doing that research beforehand and really searching out agents who are excited about the stories you're writing, or who have, it on their manuscript wish list, or who from what you can find that you would work well together, querying those and doing that research on the forefront is definitely helpful to the whole entire process.
Exactly, because your agent is going to be your person. Like that's the person in your corner the whole ride, or at least you hope, right? Like you want to get along really, really well with your agent, and you want to find someone who's like going to fight for you and your story and just like really believes in you. And like I feel like I can go to my agent with literally any question and she'll never even bat an eyelash. And that's like how it should be, I think.
I think so for sure too. Yeah. And to be able to find and have that rhythm is so important.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, awesome. I mean, thanks for sharing those tips, and I'm glad you found like a good partner for you and your debut, but also all the other books that you'll write.
Yeah, me too.
So my next question is a two-parter. I'd love to know what the hardest part of writing is for you and what the hardest part of being an author is for you.
So for me, I feel like the hardest part of writing is actually getting that first draft done. So I have seen like debates between authors, like which is worse, drafting or editing. And for me, I fully believe drafting is way harder. And it's just for me, like trying to figure out the structure of the whole book and close all those loopholes. And it's almost like I get like decision fatigue because I can do whatever I want. And there's something very thrilling, but also totally exhausting, right? Like, oh my God, this is a blank page and anything can happen. And what am I going to pick?
Definitely.
Happen, So that to me is just like the toughest part. I love editing. So then the hardest part about being a writer, I feel like, has been marketing myself. So I think a lot of authors and writers are like introverts by nature. Not all of us, but I certainly am. And I'm not used to talking about myself this much. And so sometimes I feel really shy, or like I'm maybe annoying people when I share things. And again, this is totally like imposter syndrome coming into play. But just like having to figure out how to push through that has been, I feel like, a difficult challenge, like a worthwhile one, but it's certainly been difficult,
Oh yeah. And you're definitely not alone in that. I hear that from a lot of the authors who are on the podcast about this being the hardest part of being an author.
Yeah, it's just tough. Like, I don't know. I'm not used to being like, oh, I'm so great. This thing I did is so great. Even if I think that, it's like the thing, it's like in your head, right? Like
yes.
you're quiet about it.
Right.
So it's interesting.
Well, you're doing a wonderful job at it.
Oh, thank you.
Well, let me flip this question on you. So instead of the hardest parts, tell me the best part of being a writer and being an author for you.
So the best part of being a writer is really getting to like do what I love. So this writing is truly what I'm like passionate about and what I would be doing basically whether or not anyone was interested in the stories, right? Like I was going to be writing no matter what. So that's great. And then getting to create stories for people who I feel don't often get their stories told. So with Fat Chance Charlie Vega, this story is obviously for everybody. Like I hope everybody loves it and reads it and sees like a little part of them in Charlie.
Yeah.
But it's also like especially for like fat brown or Puerto Rican girls who I know like that's me, that's my identity, and I feel like I haven't gotten a chance to read a lot of books that feature someone like me as a main character. So there's this real like treat to be able to make a story that is for people who don't often get those stories. So I feel very humbled and really excited about that part. And then the best part about being an author, I would say, is connecting with readers. So I'm an avid reader myself, and I just love like so many books and so many authors, and I just like feel like this is so incredible that now people get to read what I wrote and like reach out. That's so wild to me. And the book hasn't even come out yet, and people have just been really warm and wonderful. Like they've taken beautiful photos of the book, or they've like written these heartfelt messages to me. Yesterday, I just saw that somebody did a piece of fan art of Charlie.
What?
I know, like it's just so surreal, and it's nice to connect with readers and know that they liked the book in whatever way that's meaningful to them. And then post-COVID, I'm also hoping one of the best parts will be like connecting with actual high schoolers, you know, and like going to high school.
Yes. I mean, I feel like that is why we, you know, write and like slave over these stories, is just the idea that somebody, one person at least, even if it's just one, will connect with your story and, you know, have that special, you know, feeling that we as readers get when we read our favorite books. So I totally see how that would be amazing. And yeah, fan art, that's just amazing when somebody spends the time to make that art because they loved something about your book so much is pretty special.
Right? Like, not only did you read it, but then you drew something from it. I don't know. It blows my mind.
That's amazing. I love it. I mean, that's very special.
Yeah, totally.
Well, awesome. Thank you for sharing your answers to those questions. My next question for you is a little bit about your writing process. So do you find yourself when you're drafting, which I know you said is not your favorite, is kind of hard, are you more of a pantser, more of a planner, or do you find yourself somewhere in between?
Definitely somewhere in between now, but I was a pantser all the way with my first novel. Like, I really was just like, I'm just going to write and I'm going to see what happens.
Yeah.
And I had the luxury of that, right, because there was no like deadline to me. There was no, I was just writing it for fun.
Right.
So I could take my time and just see sort of where it goes. But now, in order to sort of keep myself on task, I need an outline of some kind. And I'm also slightly more experienced. Like I've been through the copy editing and the editing process. So I know a little bit more about what story beats the books should hit.
Yeah.
So the outline really helps me there. Because otherwise, like, I could just be like writing scenes about, you know, crushes for like a zillion pages. Well, okay, but nothing happens, right? Like, you kind of need a plot. So I definitely find myself somewhere in the middle, though. Like, I have a rough outline. I have an idea of what I want to have happen. But then sometimes, and I don't know if this is your experience too as a writer, but sometimes you're like in it and you're writing and it just like suddenly you just did something in the story and your character did something that you weren't planning.
Oh yeah.
And now, yeah, right? Like it changes everything.
Oh
you're
yeah.
Like, oh my God.
For sure.
And I think I think that's a great thing, right? Like, you're figuring out where the story needs to go, and also the story is kind of telling you where it wants to go, and there's something really freeing about that, I feel like.
Oh, it's like the best feeling when you're writing and then your character just does something and you see all the cool things that could happen after that. You're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that, but here we go. Like, that works perfect. Sometimes it doesn't work perfect and your character does something and you're like, okay, I have to follow this thread even though I know it's not going to work. But the times that it works is beautiful, for sure.
Exactly. It's always worth trying, I feel like.
I feel like, too. I was definitely the same. I pantsed my first book that I wrote completely, and I loved it. It was so fun. But I had to revise that thing so much because it was like
exactly
garbage, you know? Like, there was just so much that was a mess. So yeah, now I definitely am in between. I don't outline the whole book, but I outline like the different acts as I'm writing them. And sometimes like with this one I just finished drafting, I knew the midpoint and like the climax and how I wanted it to end. So I actually wrote those scenes out and then like, you know, filled in the rest, and that helped me a lot. But yeah, I think as you just write more, you feel those beats more, you understand what needs to happen when, and it gets a little bit, I think, easier on the planning side.
Yeah, I agree. And can I just say that it is totally amazing to me to hear that you will write stuff later in the book and then fill the rest in. Like,
yes.
That is incredible. I am very much like, oh no, I have to start at the beginning.
Really?
And see where, I can't jump around, but I'm so amazed at people who can. Like, that's a true talent as far as I'm concerned.
Well, thank you. I feel like sometimes when I get these stories in my head, like, I'll get the ending first or the midpoint, and so it's like, okay, if I don't write it now, I'm gonna lose this feeling or, you know, my idea for it, so I've got to get it out even if it's not super, you know, well written at that point.
I love that.
And what I like about this is we all do it differently, right? Like, you write in chronological order. I don't. There are people who probably start from the end and write backwards. Like, who knows? But, you know, we all end up reaching the same goal and writing in just our own way.
Exactly. It's like so unique to each person.
Yes. Yeah. Once you find your method and, you know, how it works for you, you gotta just be true to you and roll with it. And don't compare yourself too much to others because it is a very unique process, I feel.
Totally. And don't you kind of feel like it can differ like book to book? Like,
oh,
so,
yes.
Right? Like, so for book one, it was totally different than for book two for me. I don't know.
No, I think you're totally right on that. This book I just wrote, I felt like I planned it and wrote it a lot different. The book I am querying right now is like a murder mystery, and I had to plan that one out so much more just because of the genre, and, you know, I had to figure things out before so I could lay the clues and all that. So yeah, I think depending on what you're writing, it might require something a little bit different of you.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
It is. But, you know, just roll with it. It'll all work out. Well, so we just talked about, like, drafting. Now tell me about revising. I know you said you really like revising. So what does your revision process look like before you send things to your agent? Because, of course, you have your agent and your editor. But what do you do, like, first, just, you know, before you send it to them to make sure things are really where you want them to be?
Yeah, I like to take a break from whatever I've written for maybe a couple of days, sometimes a week. Like, it depends on how sharp that deadline is.
Yes.
Like, how quickly is that approaching? But I like to take some kind of break and sort of like try to forget it in a way, and then come back to it with totally fresh eyes. And then like read through the entire thing. So I'm sort of meticulous with revisions. Like, I really like to go back to the beginning and just go through it and make changes. And so sometimes, you know, maybe it's in chapter 5 or something, I might, you know, delete a scene and rewrite a scene or change something. And then once I do that, I read through the chapter once or twice or whatever. And then I like to go back to the beginning and reread. And for me, this is really great in terms of like copy editing as well. I'm kind of going, like, catching it all, and I end up reading it so many times that I like to think it cuts down on work later. So it's like kind of front loading the work, like the amount of times I read it while I'm revising. Maybe there won't be as much work later. I don't know if that's true, but that's just what I tell myself. But yeah, I like to see how things flow, and that also helps me get like in the mindset of the character. And also sometimes just like as a reader, how am I feeling right now? And does this feel like this scene jumped too quickly? Like, is this going too slowly? And I try to ask those questions, and hopefully that informs me, like, and tells me what I might need to go back and change. Like, do I need to explain more about a character? Do I need to just cut something completely because it feels out of place? And just kind of explore those ideas.
I love it. I mean, I think, reading it can be so time consuming. And I always I find myself having a hard time reading all the way through without like getting lost and being like, oh, I should go fix this right now. And, all that stuff. So it is, but I think it is super beneficial to take a break, give yourself some, fresh mind, read some other books, write something different, right? Like, yeah, help yourself forget it. Yeah. But the big read through can definitely be super helpful. I love doing that.
Yeah, same. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll actually I can send yourself documents as like a Kindle.
Yes.
Like on your Kindle. Yes. So I've done that too, where it's like, really, I'm trying to read it as if it's like a different book. Like it's not mine that I wrote, and just see how I feel. And that can be a nice way and like a quick way. Like now I have it on my phone. So if I have a couple of minutes, I can sort of read through a couple of pages.
Oh, yeah. I love doing that. And I feel like sometimes I catch different things, like different, like if a sentence flows weird or if I spelled something wrong. Like I feel like I catch it differently on my phone than on paper, than on my computer. So I like seeing it in the different formats too.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know for some people, revisions and maybe newer authors, like they can be a little tricky. Like, where do I start? What do I do? So always good to just like share what our process is.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. My next thing, I would love to have you share something your readers wouldn't necessarily know about you.
Okay, so this is like a weird one. So I really love RuPaul's Drag Race, the TV show. Mm-hmm. And I love it so much that I have been to DragCon, where you can go and meet some of the wonderful drag queens who have been on the show. And not only have I been, like, I've been multiple times. So it's like this super fun thing. My husband and I watched this show together. We got into it a couple of years ago when we both had like this horrible head cold. And we couldn't, and it was around Christmas, and so we had a couple of days off, and we were like, you know what, we want to watch something light and fun, and so we settled on RuPaul's Drag Race, and then loved it so much, we went back and, like, consumed everything from season 1 on, and it just, like, is this super fun, light way where we don't have to, like, think too much.
Yes.
We get to watch, we get to watch these, like, men or women or non-binary folks like transform into these campy characters. It's just like wonderful. So I am a huge fan, and we've been to like a bunch of in-person shows when it was, safe and allowed. We used to go to some of the like shows in person and watch the lip syncs, and it's just fun.
I love that. I will say the transformation that they make is like crazy. They're so talented in the things that they can make happen.
I know, like I can't really do my makeup. I love fashion, but I'm not very good with makeup or like hair, and so I feel like I'm just fascinated just watching, because I don't have those skills. So I find it very relaxing and like interesting to watch other people do it.
Oh, yeah. I love watching that. I've been to a couple drag shows, too, and I remember being, like, in awe of them while they were performing, and then seeing them afterwards without the makeup or the clothes. I'm like, how is that the same person? Like, that's insane. It's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that there are lots of other people out there who will be like, yes, I love that show too.
I hope so. There's a lot of us out there, I feel like.
Yes, I feel like there is. Well, my next question, I'd love for you to tell me a little bit about when your love of writing began, like when you knew you had this author dream.
So I loved books, I feel like, since I can remember, like since I was a kid, right? Yeah. So I used to make a lot of trips to the library, and my grandma would take me shopping for books as a kid. Like that was a fun thing that we would do together. But in terms of writing, I specifically remember in like the 3rd grade, I was doing, like our teacher had given us this timed writing assignment, and it was, you know, for one of those like tests that you're supposed to do for like the state or whatever. Yeah. Or it was like something like that. And so it was only supposed to be, let's say, like 15 minutes or whatever. But I know that I started writing after she gave us the prompt, and I got so lost in it that I was the very last one out of all of my classmates who was still writing. Like, so everyone else had moved on to other things. You know, they were, you know, reading or playing or talking and laughing. And I was just like in this story and having fun, and my story kept growing and getting longer and longer, and like I had to ask for more pages to like hand write. And so it was then that I was like, wait, not everybody wants to just write several pages about a writing prompt. And I realized this was like a thing I was enjoying, and so it started becoming a thing I did just for fun, where I would write like these, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 page long stories, like really short stuff, because I was only in elementary school. And then it got bigger when I got into middle school, and I really was into boy bands at the time. So yes. I was in middle school in like the 2000s, like early 2000s, and I loved like the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC and 8 Degrees and whatever. And so me and my friends would write boy band fan fiction just for fun.
Yes.
Yes, right? Like, and that was like my first time like trying to write actual stories that, like, they were bad, don't get me wrong, but like trying to figure out like, well, what's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and whatever. And it ended up being like, wow, I really think this is so fun. I wish I could write a book someday. And I'm really glad I stuck with it. Like in college, I majored in English and journalism, and now I have an actual book coming out. So it's like a love that hasn't gone away, and I'm so grateful for that.
That's amazing. Yeah, I feel like a love of reading, not all the time, but a lot of the time, can turn into this love of storytelling and writing, or storytelling in lots of different ways. But I love that you have these memories of doing it from when you were a very young age. And yeah, like I have some of my stories that I wrote in high school. I finished my first novel in high school, and it's like a garbage fire and will never see the light of day, but I will keep it forever, because we learn something from each manuscript, and we get better and better. So it's like so nice sometimes to be able to go back and read it and be like, okay, you know, like I've improved, like things have gotten better. I can do this.
It definitely is. And honestly, I also have some of my really old stuff from like high school, and it's so laughably bad. Like I have read these out loud dramatically to my husband, and my husband only. And like, and it's nice for the laughs too, where it's like, oh, I thought this was so deep back then, you know? It really wasn't.
And you're like, I mean, it was like teenager deep, you know? We thought we were so deep and emotional then. Well, I love it. Thank you for sharing that. I have just one final question for you, and it is a hard question, probably the hardest out of all the ones I've asked you. I'd love to know what your favorite book is right now. This isn't your favorite book of all time, just something you've read recently that you like can't stop talking to people about.
Okay, I had a hard time like picking a favorite, but I finally came down with one. So my favorite book right now is probably Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas.
Oh yeah.
I read that a little after it had come out, and there was so much hype. Like people were like screaming about this on Twitter, it felt like. And I'm like, I better check this book out so I know what everybody is talking about. Like, I want to join this conversation. And I ended up listening to an audiobook version of it, and it was so phenomenal. Like, after a couple of pages, I feel like, yup, I get it. I understand exactly why everyone loves this. This is so amazing. There was just so much, like, heart to the story and so much growth, and, like, the magic in it was phenomenal. It was also, like, grounded in realism, so there was this nice feeling of, like, you know what, this could happen, right? Like, who says this can't happen? And the love story was beautiful, and it was also funny. And I feel like it's hard to capture all of those wonderful things in a book, right? Like,
yeah.
To have, like, magic and growth and this and that, and also make people laugh, that's tough.
That is tough.
Yeah, that's why it's my favorite book right now. And it's the one I, like, tell people you have to read this.
Well, that's amazing. I got that one for a Christmas present. It's on my desk right now in my, like, read me pile. So I'm super excited because that has been quite a few people's favorite book on the podcast.
Yeah, you have to let me know what you think. Like, email me or tweet me or something.
Yes.
This would be so fun.
I will, like, scream at you about it when I get to, like, the first few pages in and be like, I know now the feeling.
Well, I think you'll love it.
Awesome. I'm super excited. Thank you. I know this is a hard question, but it's, like, nice to just continue to get more and more book recommendations for our never-ending to-be-read pile, right?
Oh, yeah. Mine feels like it's a mile long, and I don't know how I'm going to get through it all, but I'm excited.
Yeah, mine is like a whole bookshelf behind me all the time that's like, read me, read me, read me all day long.
No pressure, right?
What
the
do you
books
do?
Are just, like, looking at you.
I know, staring at me all day. Crystal, thank you so much for chatting with me and telling us all about your debut novel and letting me and my listeners get to know you a little bit better.
Thank you. This has been so much fun, and I really enjoyed all of your questions and just, like, thinking about books. Like, that's my favorite thing. So, thank you.
Yes, I could talk about books all day long.
Same.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Authors and Agents with Rose Quinn. Make sure to rate, review, subscribe. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at RoseQuinny, QUINNY. See you next time.